This is the Chairman's Countdown with your host, Zach Mottl, Chairman of the Coalition for a Prosperous America. Countdown with us as we explore trade, tariffs, and industrial strategy with the leaders driving America's prosperity and security.
Hello, I want to welcome you to the Chairman's Countdown with Zach Mottl. I'm your host, Zach Mottl, Chairman of the Coalition for a Prosperous America, and we're here today, right here on Home Talk USA Radio. And don't forget, we're streaming live at hometalkusa.com as we broadcast all across America. And today we've got a great show lined up for you. We're going to spend some time talking to Brian Riley. He's the CEO of Guardian Bikes. They make an amazing product. They make it right here in America, and they're fully committed to making those bikes in America. So I'm really excited for the lineup today. I know we're going to have a great show for you here. I think that, things are changing in today's world also. And I think, we've got a real leader here with Brian talking about how he's navigated the changing world of manufacturing and producing things in America. We'll get into that. We'll talk a little bit about a global context. And later on, we're also going to bring on Chuck Benoit. He's the trade counsel for the Coalition for the Prosperous America. Chuck is also an expert, a historian on tariffs. There's nobody that knows more about him, about the history of trade and tariffs than Chuck Benoit. So I really look forward to getting into that today. I'd like to bring on Brian Riley here. Brian, again, is the CEO of Guardian Bikes. Guardian has a really innovative product. And, Brian, why don't you start and tell us a little bit about what your product is and what you do, what makes it so innovative?
Yes, we've become known initially for making the safest bikes available for children. We created a really successful business out of that. Now we're doing adult bikes as well that are really designed to ride around the neighborhood with your kids. So you think about Guardian Bikes as a family bike brand that's trying to bring safe, quality bikes to millions of families in the USA. So I always compare it to, we're trying to be like what Schwinn used to be, in several generations ago, where you've got an American manufacturing powerhouse churning out millions of great quality bikes for families all over the United States. And so that's what we're trying to do at Guardian Bikes.
Well, I rode on one of those Schwinn bikes, so my kids will be riding on a Guardian bike. You have a really unique product, don't you? There's a safety thing about your bike, isn't that? Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah. So I mentioned, the company's always had a mission of trying to make bikes safer. And we actually started not with the creation of a bike, but just the creation of this safer braking system for bikes. So I had a family member get in a really serious head over handlebar accident, which is where you over apply your front brake and it can send you flipping over the front of the handlebars. So that happened to a family member of mine. He broke his neck. It was this big traumatic experience that happened in my family. So I started working on this new type of braking system that could completely prevent that type of accident from happening. That technology is called SureStop. And in the beginning of the company, I created this technology, and I was pretty convinced that the right business model was to go out to all the big incumbent brands in the market, like Schwinn or Huffy or Trek or Specialized, and try to partner with them to get that braking system adopted into their bikes. And I did that for a handful of years with some success, but not really breakout success. But it really helped me learn how this whole industry works and how the supply chain works. And I quickly learned, how dominated the supply chain for bikes and bikes components were. It was completely captured by China. So it was like 97% of all the bikes imported into the United States were coming from China. And I really wanted to evolve the company into creating a brand, Guardian Bikes, where we could really not only apply this braking technology to our own bikes, but control every aspect of the quality of those bikes and eventually make them in the United States, which now we do today. But it's been a journey to get there that all started with this technology to try to make bikes safer.
Wow, that's a fantastic story, and what a great journey and a great commitment to American manufacturing and the jobs. Speaking of the jobs, I think a few weeks ago you had a ribbon cutting ceremony for Guardian's expansion in Seymour, Indiana. Tell us a little bit about that, the growth, how it went, and what that meant for you, your team, and your community.
Yeah, it's a major milestone for Guardian. So today we're the only scaled bicycle manufacturing facility that exists in the United States, and specifically manufacturing the bicycle frame in the United States. So actually buying steel and fabricating frames and powder coating and decaling them, kind of the heart of the bike. That manufacturing process hasn't been done at scale in the United States since I think the last manufacturer to leave was kind of like the early 1980s. So
Half a century, basically.
yeah, so what's really exciting is what the ribbon cutting was all about was Guardian creating a bicycle frame manufacturing facility that can churn out many, many thousands of frames per day. That capacity right now is built out to about 1 million frames per year. So it's the first time that bicycle frame manufacturing has been brought back to the United States in decades. And it was a big milestone moment for us as a company and all of our supporters and partners and vendors. And it was fun. We had hundreds of people come and we were able to give tours of the facility and kind of, show off what we built. And we had some really great guests there. And so we're really proud of it. It's scaling up and coming online now. And it's the first in many steps to bring 100% of the content of our bike into the United States. So there's still some parts that we import, but the more that we're building up our manufacturing capabilities, the more that we can make every single component onshore. And that's the goal over time, is to bring all the bike onshore into the United States.
It's a noble goal. It's great for your company, I believe, and I think it's great for America and American workers. There's about 200 people, I believe, working at your factory, and they've all got a nice, good job thanks to your bravery, your courage, and your vision. I mean, this really, truly is. In today's world, when the herd is going one direction, they're all going to Asia. You had, the vision to do something different. What made you believe you could even do this? I mean, it's so bold. How did you think you could do it?
So I always, when I look back at my whole entrepreneurial journey, like I said, it started with this braking system. And sometimes I look back on the journey and think, man, if I didn't waste those years like trying to sell the braking system to everybody and I just started Guardian earlier, I could have gotten an even bigger head start. But the reality is, had I not started with the braking system model and trying to sell it into all these existing companies, I wouldn't have really learned kind of how this whole industry works and developed kind of a vision of how to really disrupt it. And what's interesting is, you're right, like literally every single brand that you've heard of that's sold in the United States is importing their bikes from somewhere. Most of that's coming from China. Some now is coming from Cambodia and Vietnam, but everything's imported. And so what that creates is just a really long supply chain. Takes many, many months to order bikes and get them in the United States. So a lot of these companies aren't very good at reacting to any changes in demand, and they don't have a very resilient supply chain. It's also very hard to control quality. So you think of something like a children's bicycle, like a parent is putting, maybe their 6-year-old daughter on a bicycle and sending them down the street, maybe to ride to their friend's house or something. And you don't want an unsafe product that they're riding on. But the reality is that, all the brands that exist today that are importing bicycles, it's really, really hard to have a bike that's set up properly, that's safe to ride, that has every single bolt torqued to spec. And so given that the company's mission has been safety this whole entire time, and given how I, developed this vision of how to be really disruptive, our model is we sell direct consumer only. We don't do any retail, and we have our own US factory. So we're truly vertically integrated from a US factory floor to customer's door. And by doing business that way, and by being able to control the build quality of the bikes and like have exacting specifications for how they're set up and how they're delivered to people, we really could be disruptive because we both make a safer product, but we can be much more reactive to customers. We can have improvement cycles of the product so quickly. To give you a perfect example, like our QC leader is also our customer service leader. So he's just listening to any single problem that a customer has, and he can literally walk out to the production line and fix that problem. And the very next bikes coming off the line don't have that problem anymore. So when you think about those iteration cycles, it's a huge advantage because you can just create a better and better and better product over time. That same cycle, if you heard a problem from a customer, if you even sell direct consumer at all and you even hear from your customer, but if you heard it from a customer in your Huffy, it could take 8 months by the time, you're getting a bike that doesn't have that problem. So just all that control and that vertical integration the vision really was, even though it's hard, even though it's a huge step, even though there's a lot of struggle to it, creating a factory in the United States and sort of building a business in this way in an industry that's so outsourced and, doesn't really have a vertically integrated model to it, we could be really disruptive and really successful and take a bunch of market share. And then the really cool thing is, I think the more successful that we are, we're becoming, a kind of a beacon of hope that, oh my gosh, you actually can make, an everyday consumer product at an affordable price point and do it really well in the United States.
Well, I'm glad you're saying that, Brian. You're not to be too punny. You're pedaling hard, and you're not even going to be braking at all. You're just going really fast here. But we're going to talk a little bit more about that. We've got a break coming up here in a minute, so we'll talk a little bit more about the vertical integration and how your business decisions were made. If you want to learn more about the work of the Coalition for a Prosperous America, please go to our website. Again, it's prosperousamerica.org. We'll be right back after this quick break. Welcome back to the Chairman's Countdown. I'm Zach Mottl, Chairman of the Coalition for a Prosperous America, and we're here on Home Talk Radio discussing how to make great jobs in America, making great products for Americans. And so earlier in the segment, we were speaking with Brian Riley, the CEO of Guardian Bikes. They employ about 200 people in Seymour, Indiana, and we heard about his vertical integration and his journey to innovation and building bikes here in America. We've got with us today Charles Benoit. Charles is the trade counsel for the Coalition for a Prosperous America. He's also the preeminent historian on tariffs and trade in America and manufacturing stories in America. He knows a lot about the history of bike manufacturing. Charles, please tell us a little bit about bikes in America.
Yeah, Zach, thanks so much for having me here. With bikes, we know exactly the how, when, who of how we lost this industry because, God bless them, after World War II, after 1950, 100% of the bikes that were sold in America, 99% of the bikes that were sold here were made here. And they started to lose that at a very quick clip. And they fought like hell to save their industry in the 50s and the 60s, 70s, 80s, right up to the early 90s with all of the, asking for safeguard tariffs from the Tariff Commission, anti-dumping. And through all that litigation and all those filings, we have all the data. So we know exactly what happened. And, it's a great example of how nothing was gained from offshoring. So you go back to 1950, we have 99% of bikes sold here are made here. We rapidly lost that. By 1954, we'd lost 40% of the market to imports. And the majority of the imports were from Britain. Did Britain just outcompete us? No. What happened was in 1949, in September 1949, they devalued their currency by half. Familiar story, right? And that's what led to just a massive a bloodletting of domestic producers.
Yeah, well, in just one generation, right? Just one generation example of how poor government policy, sending an industry, letting them be thrown to predatory competition from overseas, basically offshoring our industrial policy, allowed them to capture an entire industry that employed so many Americans and had such a rich history. I want to bring Brian Riley back on and talk a little bit with the two of you together about, how this happened, how we can do better going forward. Guardian's success, I think, is kind of a bellwether, right, for how we can do this better and how we can do supply chains in America better. And also how we can do federal trade policy better in America. Brian, maybe you have some thoughts on that first, and I'd love to hear a little bit more from Charles as well.
Yeah. So, I mean, my whole career and my whole time in the bike industry, I started this business around 2013. And so, I was traveling to China and going to trade shows and basically figuring out how the industry worked and who all the players were. And so from the time I got started in it, I've only known it as a completely outsourced industry that's pretty much dominated by China. And so, as I learned the history of it all, I became aware that pretty much all the bikes used to be made in the United States. And there's a lot of cool, stories there. World War II, you had all these different bike manufacturing powerhouses like Schwinn. And those companies and a lot of their component vendors switched a lot of their production to wartime production and supported the war effort in a lot of different ways. So it's a perfect example of just, how a domestic industry can be used in a national security sense. But all of that started to go away. And so when I got into it, it was all outsourced. And so there wasn't really a clear path on, how you would do a US factory if you could do a US factory. And as the COVID year started, I think that was the first time that I started to realize like how fragile these supply chains really are. And it was also in Trump's first administration where he was really driving a lot of the conversation about why it's important to reshore, and tariffs were being introduced for the first time. And so I think by the time we were kind of in the middle of COVID, we started to realize like the world's never going to look the same after this COVID thing is over. And it's the start of what I felt like was a big tectonic shift in like a reaffirming of the importance of making things in the market that they're consumed in. And as I had visited all these factories in China, I'd see exactly how they did it over there. And I started to become pretty passionate about trying to figure out, how to do it here, and taking all the lessons that I had learned from my time in the industry and try to see if we could do a factory competitively. And so, and where we're at today, I think we're still the only company that's doing it, but I think it's now completely obvious to me, and maybe not to others, but I think we're the era of just opening our market to imports, the cheapest imports that we can get, and just letting them pour in, and just kind of extinguishing all this manufacturing capability onshore is over, and we're the pendulum swinging the other way. And so I think as the pendulum continues to swing that way, and there's the right policy in place, and it becomes easier and more competitive to pull off what we've pulled off with bicycles, an entire movement can be started where when you're talking about reindustrialization or reshoring manufacturing, you're not just talking about semiconductors or defense applications, but you're talking about everyday products like a bicycle that millions and millions of American consumers buy every year, being built on shore and being delivered to customers on shore.
You bring up a couple of my favorite points, Brian. I've got to ask you though bluntly, would you view tariffs as a positive policy? It sounds like you would.
Yeah, I think tariffs used properly are super positive. I think, I give President Trump a lot of credit for really driving the conversations. The first president I remember in my lifetime that really is driving the conversation around reshoring and tariffs and why it's important to make things in the United States. And I think, if we find the right tariff policies, which specifically for bikes, like a specific tariff for bike that's a dollar-driven tariff, that's a flat tariff on every single bike, would be a lot more effective than percentages. And the reason why is, like, you take a company like Huffy, which a lot of people think is still an American company. They're actually a Chinese company, and they're owned by their OEM. So you can play a lot of games with tariffs that are based on a percentage of the value, because you can move value around. You can, move things to different countries and kind of.
You hear all about it, my friend.
Yeah. So
tariffs
are extremely powerful, and they're a great tool to really, really accelerate the reshoring and manufacturing. And I think the trick is getting that policy right, and getting a policy that really moves the needle on driving investment in the United States, because it takes a lot of investment, a lot of commitment to do what we've done.
It does. You've invested a lot of money, and if you're thrown to the wolves, the predatory wolves, that's just going to make all that investment for naught. So I think we need to get trade policy right. Tariffs are an important piece of it. I love specific tariffs, and I love the points you made about, look, people say to me, Zach, what should we make in America? And I say, everything that we can. And they say, really? I said, yeah, number one, it's good jobs. Number two, it's national security. You made the point that the bicycle manufacturers were part of the surge in the war to be able to make other parts. People don't think about it. Companies making everything, bikes, paper clips, computer chips, all of that is important. And it's also all good jobs. So anyway, Chuck, what do you think? We got about a minute here. What do you see about the president's trade policy and what Brian said about tariffs?
Yeah. So, the good news is we've all, our trade policy, when in the rare instances where we have focused on domestic manufacturing, it's been like, well, we can't lose the big mill. Well, look, defense procurement is not going to sustain the giant, our steel and aluminum mills. You need the steady customers that the commercial market provides. So now, for the first time, 2025, the government has acknowledged that. We've got these tremendous inclusion rounds. So you hear about the steel tariffs, the aluminum tariffs, the copper tariffs, but that actually includes downstream fabricated items. And I think that this is where the exciting, and this is where we can do things like bicycles.
I think that's exactly right. And if we want to have, for our taxpayer dollar, right, our defense industry will be even more competitive and more cost effective, and we're spreading it over a broad base of commercial products as well. So, we're really thinking the right way. But we've got to go to a quick break. I'm Zach Mottl with the Chairman's Countdown. I'll see you after the break. Hey, welcome back. We're on Home Talk Radio. I'm Zach Mottl, the chairman of the Coalition for a Prosperous America, and this is the Chairman's Countdown. We're counting down the good jobs that we're making in America, the great producers coming here and opening factories in America, and all of the great things happening to raise Americans' wages here by producing things in America, making us strong and productive. Earlier in the segment, we had Brian Riley, CEO of Guardian Bikes, on the show, and we had Charles Benoit, Trade Counsel from the Coalition for a Prosperous America. We were talking a little bit about trade policy that can help companies like Brian's, who are employing workers in America, expanding and investing to create good jobs for Americans. Charles was telling us about some things that can help companies like Brian's and others. What other parts, Charles, of trade policy, tariffs are a piece of it. What are some other pieces of trade policy can our government do to help bring more producers back to America like Guardian Bikes?
Yes, I mean, tariffs is a big thing. I think the inclusion rounds are wonderful because the best way to set tariffs is product by product, as opposed to country by country, right? I mean, does it really help America that much if we load up China on tariffs and then everything just goes to Vietnam? That's not going to move the needle for people here. So setting tariffs, proper product, and the inclusion rounds are great. I think for the next step, they got to get past one size fits all approach. So Brian was talking about specific tariffs, and I think that's exactly right. If we just keep on, like right now, the headline is 50% is the steel tariff, and if bicycles, or flatware, for example, goes under that, okay, it's 50%, but if the invoice price, if the import invoice price is like $2, I'm thinking like flatware or something, adding $1 doesn't move the needle, right? Like often most of the markup is in domestic distribution. So with specific tariffs, which is something we've historically used a lot of, especially for steel goods, including bicycles, including flatware, that's we wouldn't have had that offshoring to Britain, for example. By post World War II, we already converted to ad valorem because of the GATT. So, but if the tariffs are measured in U.S. currency, and another country devalues its currency, you don't have that problem. So I think that's what we'd like to see from the administration is getting past just say 25 or 50% as a one size fits all and start thinking about tariffs on a private product basis. And the inclusion round is a great mechanism for that.
That makes a lot of sense, Charles. Does this get around also that country hopping issue too? Because I know let's say we put a 25% tariffs on products from China or Vietnam or whatever, and then it just comes from somewhere else and it doesn't apply. Is that correct?
That's exactly right. So that's why we love the Section 232 national security tariffs, is because they're by default global. Now, people say,
would specific tariffs be global also? Would specific tariffs be global?
Exactly. That's exactly right. So you'd have a global tariff. Now, let's take pharmaceuticals as an example. There's a pharmaceutical Section 232 action. That's a thing where you can't mess around. Like you can't have any shortages. And so what do you just do in that? Another tool is limited import quota. We've been doing this in sugar seamlessly forever. The key is just reject the notion that our producers should be in unlimited price competition with anyone, anywhere in the whole world. Like you have to have that as a, overall paradigm. And then, with sugar, we authorize, certain countries, because we only make about 3/4 of the sugar that we consume here. So certain countries get a certain volume of quota. And that's adjusted all the time based on Department of Agriculture works with USTR to adjust the quota based on, how much we're producing here, climate conditions, what happened. Mexico had a big shortage. So we know how to do this. And what they did in sugar is they just rejected the notion that we're going to put, sugar beet farmers in the Midwest and sugarcane producers down in Florida into unlimited price competition with indentured servants all around the world. We need a lot more of what we're doing in sugar taken across all product categories, farming and manufacturing.
So we've got some good examples of how to do it right. Brian, if we get trade policy right, what does it mean for your company, right? If we get trade policy right, not only for steel, aluminum, and all your inputs, but your outputs also, your bikes and your products, your braking systems, what does that mean for you and how you can run your company?
Yeah. So, Guardian it's in a good position because we do have a highly differentiated product and, we're known for safety and quality. So, we sell bikes today at price points kind of anywhere from $149 to the mid 300s, but let's call our average price point is in the mid 200s. When you look at a bicycle from Walmart, you can still get a bicycle from Walmart as cheap as $90 or $100. And so most of that difference is these bikes are being, produced at scale in China, a lot of times using a lot of different incentives from the government and all kinds of kind of non-market activities to be able to, if you think about
Subsidize power, right? They subsidize the power. They don't pay taxes. They don't have to pay their loans back. What else? I mean, it's all
lots of currency. I mean, so if you just think about, if you think about that price point, it's kind of insane that you can get a bicycle on a shelf for $100. But the bottom line is, we still have to compete against that. So there's still a big cost difference. And what really closes the gap on that cost difference is something like a specific tariff. So if you had $150 tariff per bike, you would immediately kind of level the playing field where not only us, I mean, that would make us just absolute pedal to the gas, invest as much and as fast as we could on scaling at production. Cause now the playing field is level and you can absolutely kind of, an American producer like us can really go after a lot of market share. But it also creates a situation where if you want to be selling bikes successfully in the United States, you have to really consider making them in the United States. And how do you make them in the United States? And so it would set off a whirlwind of companies trying to figure out how to produce here and start factories again. And if that's right, specific tariff is there and it's global and you can't just, right now it's a little bit like whack-a-mole because if a China tariff goes up, you can go into Walmart right now, you'll see a lot of made in Cambodia on the bottom of the frame. The bike itself is not all made in Cambodia, just the frame production gets moved over to Cambodia. And currently there's a CBP ruling that says wherever the bicycle frame is made determines country of origin. So what people are doing is just making a frame in Cambodia. All the other components come from China. It can even get assembled in China. But if the frame's from Cambodia, it's a made in Cambodia bike and it comes in at a much lower tariff than China is. Specific tariff is global and it solves all of that. So it actually
plays over when we start talking about all those things, right? Let's keep it simple. A simple system works the best.
Exactly. So you do a simple system like specific tariff that's global. What happens is it immediately levels the playing field. And the way to be competitive is to really think about making it onshore. And so I think once that happens, that's going to drive a huge amount of investment in the United States and a huge amount of jobs. We employ about 300 people and make about 500,000 bikes a year, but you can imagine, making 15 million bikes a year in the United States, it'd be many, many thousands of jobs. And that's just
that's what I wanted to hear.
Component manufacturing would likely come back as well.
That's what we want to do. That's what we want to hear. So it sounds like you believe kind of what we're seeing at your factory in Seymour, coupled with the right trade policy from our government and our president and our Congress, is part of a broader wave of new manufacturing growth across the country. I know I hear that from a lot of our other members at CPA too. What message do you want to send to other business leaders who are thinking about bringing, your component suppliers, maybe other vendors or companies not even related to you, but a lot of people are thinking about this and trying to figure it out. I think there's a lot of patriotic people who want to employ their own Americans, but again, for a couple decades, the trend has been the other direction. Every business advisor told you got to make it offshore. So what's your advice to other leaders who want to bring manufacturing back?
So I think, number one, it is possible and you can pull it off. So a lot of people will say like, it's possible, or you never do it and you'll never compete. And Guardian's a perfect example of a company that's doing it successfully, continuing to grow. The other thing is a lot of, I think, business leaders in the United States have been so removed from manufacturing for so long because for many decades, so many things have been outsourced that they're kind of used to operating a business that's not also doing its own manufacturing. And so I think leaders are going and looking for somebody to make their product for them in the United States. And I would say sometimes you got to look at just making it yourself. Like, what does it take to transform your business into actually doing your own manufacturing, hiring the right people and getting the right assets in place to make something yourself? Because there's not a lot of manufacturers to go to in the United States for all kinds of different products. It's been outsourced for so long that we're another example of, we used to outsource manufacturing of our brake system and bike. Now we just learned to manufacture things ourselves because there is nobody to go to. So that is a path that I think a lot of people don't really think about. And it's a daunting path sometimes, but we're a perfect example of why it's possible and why it can be a really good thing.
The vertical integration leading to your success, the willingness to take it on yourself and go, hey, if there's a problem, we're going to solve it. I respect you so much, and I thank you for taking these risks, making these investments. I wish you much, much success. I want this to pay off for you. So, we've heard a little bit from Brian about how trade policy done right is a wind at his back instead of the headwind in his face in terms of the investments he made in Seymour, Indiana, employing Americans, building bicycles, building a vertically integrated factory, making everything from the frame to the brakes to all the components that he needs for his bikes. We heard from Charles Benoit, our trade counsel, also giving us a little bit history, the perspective, and about how tariffs work and how they can be done right. We're here at the Coalition for Prosperous America. We're the only group advocating for American producers in America, making things in America. We're here on the Chairman's Countdown on Home Talk Radio. We've got a quick break, and we'll be back with you to hear more from Brian Riley and from Charles Benoit about making bikes right here in America. Hello and welcome back. I'm Zach Mottl, Chairman of the Coalition for a Prosperous America. We're here on the Chairman's Countdown on Home Talk Radio, talking with you about making things in America and the good jobs that creates for Americans. We've been on with Brian Riley and Charles Benoit, our trade counsel. And, right before the last break, Brian was talking about how he's become vertically integrated and how a lot of other manufacturers are thinking about coming back to America and how to do it. And one of the things they're struggling with is finding a place to make their products. So his solution was to get vertically integrated. I share his story. My family is a fourth generation manufacturing company. I'm the president of that company as well as the chairman of the coalition. And, we've seen it. I've had a front row seat to what bad trade policy has done. For almost 80 of my family's 100 years, we were in the telecom industry. And as soon as China came online in the early 2000s after the tech bubble burst, you couldn't say free trade fast enough as fast as my customers were running over to Asia with their supply chains. And there was nothing we could do. My workers were hurt. My family was hurt. Our community was hurt. And it was all because of bad government policy, thinking that we were going to engage in free trade. Well, let me tell you this. We've never consumed our way to prosperity. There's no country in the history of the world that has ever consumed its way to being strong and wealthy and secure. And so it's about making things. And what Brian highlighted is the challenge as we come back of getting that resiliency back in American manufacturing. And again, I've seen that in my own operations. We lose a vendor. They went under. They lost that last customer went away. And, we see it. I've pivoted to defense and space manufacturing in my business. But, every time I lose a supplier who also supports a commercial industry, the costs go up. We have less choices and less options. We lose a little bit of that sparkle, a little bit of that resiliency, and some of those good jobs for good Americans. So that's really what we're talking about. And that's why the Coalition for a Prosperous America is fighting so hard for decades. Since 2008, we've been leading the charge. We are the only organization exclusively advocating for domestic producers across farming, ranching, manufacturing, and labor. There's nobody like us out there, and it's an unusual alliance. This is a group of people that have come together recognizing that the key to all of our shared problems, the lack of prosperity, the stagnant wages, since 1979, most Americans' wages have stagnated. Costs and wages have gone up together. What we want is wages rising faster than costs. And we can do that by making things here. That's what history shows us. That's what happens in every country, including America, when you input these policies in place. So CPA is working very hard. We want 1,000 Guardian bikes. We want all those millions of factories back in America that we lost in the last 30 years. And it can happen. It can happen with these policies. I see it. The future is right in front of us. Charles, tell us a little bit give us some thoughts about, how this has happened in the past and what you see happening in the future here if we get trade policy right.
Well, I tell everyone all the time, we've industrialized once and deindustrialized once. And the one time that we industrialized was starting in the 1820s and kind of rode that through 100 years, and 1820s to 1920s. And Europe forced our hand. We can thank Napoleon for industrializing us because they cut us off from trade. So what we're trying to do right now is, industrialize we still have all these cheap imports all around us. this has actually never been done before, so no pressure. But we're just trying to, we're charting uncharted territory here. But no, seriously, I'm so excited for what Guardian's doing, especially because, it really runs counter to the, more recent narratives of like, well, we're just going to focus on the most advanced manufacturing. No, Brian, he's in taking high volume, scaled manufacturing. Not, we had, we like the really high end bicycles, titanium specific alloys. Yeah, we had that. I think, Cannondale, I mean, actually, was when they got the CEO of Gillette over there. He botched that whole thing, and we even got rid of that, very high end manufacturing, and that was like just 15 years ago, but it was super small numbers. What Brian's trying to do, the high volume manufacturing, that's the real deal. It's integral for our steel mills. We need that. So we, as a country, we have a lot riding on what Brian's trying to do right now.
We do, Charles, and I think there are examples as well. You mentioned we're the first time reindustrializing, but Germany did it after World War II. So did Japan. What did they use? They used tariffs. They used industrial policies. So we've seen this work in history. I know we can do it again. Brian, what does it mean for you? What does it mean for Guardian Bikes if we get this right? How many thousands of workers are you going to have? How many plants? And, what do you see for the future of American manufacturing when we get this right?
Yeah, so there's around 15 million bicycles sold every year in the United States. We're making about 500,000 bicycles a year in our plant. So, I mean, my hope is that we get to many millions of bicycles, made right here in Seymour, Indiana, with any component that we're not making in the house. We have a supporting supply chain clustered around us in the Midwest. So that means lighting up, new businesses or even existing businesses that might not make a bicycle part, but we get to the volume and the investment where it's just a no-brainer to operate with us and be partnered with us in our supply chain. So the vision really is, when we started, there's zero bicycle component supply chain that exists in the United States and no bicycle factories. We are now a bicycle factory. We're making some things in-house, but we still need partnership for certain things like tires or other things that, we just don't have expertise in making. So I want to have a whole supply chain clustered around us in the Midwest and be making many millions of bicycles for American consumers.
It is my dream that you have that as well. And what does it mean, your workers' wages, just real quickly? What happens to your workers' wages through this process?
Yeah, I mean, our workers on average right now make about $25 an hour, and that continues to go up as we expand and as we add more advanced automation. So the really neat thing is, as Guardian's growing, it's able to invest more and more. So the more volume that we have, the more that we invest, and we typically invest in really productive assets. So whether that be, robotics or automated welding or advanced laser cutting. And as we get into that more advanced manufacturing, those wages continue to go up. We hire more engineers, more sophisticated people. We give them advanced training to be really productive.
That's a really important point. I wanted everyone in America to hear that. So thank you for what you're doing, Brian. Very grateful that you took the time to join us in the show, but I'm more grateful of what you're doing in Seymour, Indiana, making great jobs for Americans and a great product. And I want you to make a profit while you're at it. So good luck to you, sir. We're really grateful for you. Charles, thank you for taking the time to be on the show today here. You do a fantastic job advocating for these policies and helping get it right for the government, because honestly, so many have forgotten. But anyway, I'm the chairman of the Coalition for the Prosperous America. Our hour is coming to a close, but please don't forget you can watch us online here at Home Talk USA. You can learn more about our work at America's Coalition for Prosperous America at prosperousamerica.org. Again, I'm your host. We'll be back next week with another great topic: more manufacturing, more government policy, more made in America, and more jobs for good Americans. Thank you for being with me today. Have a great week.